the Minister, Assistant Minister for Immigration. Sorry, the Assistant Minister for Women's Social Security and Ageing.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Early education is so important. The evidence is clear that children benefit from access to early education and care, and that it sets them up for the best start in life. And so it is confounding to hear those opposite, including the last speaker, try and paint this in some way as being divisive to make sure that all Australian children get the best start in life. In what world is that divisive? Only in a world where you are prepared to stand against the best interests of Australian children. Now, it does seem that that is what those opposite are prepared to do, because they are opposing this bill that gives all Australian children the best start in life. That is the hill they've chosen to die on, and look, that is their choice. But I must say I am very, very surprised. Our government, of course, started this term delivering on our commitment to deliver cheaper childcare to Australian families, and families across Australia have saved up to $2,768 since our government's childcare subsidies took effect. This is real cost of living relief that's going back into the pockets of Australian families. And now we are once again delivering reform in early education. We are replacing the activity test introduced by the previous Liberal government. We are introducing the new 3-day guarantee from January next year, guaranteeing 72 hours of childcare subsidy each fortnight. We do believe that every child has the right to early education to the best start in life, and this reform will help make that a reality right around the country. From early education through to school education, university and TAFE, our government has been delivering the investments we need to make sure that Australians are set up to get quality education, to get the education that they deserve right through life. Of course, again, we have been opposed by those opposite who do not share our belief that the best way to support Australians is to support them with education, with the best start in life, all the way through to a tertiary degree and their best start into a career. Early education is the starting point. It does set children up for their educational journey. And I, of course, have seen this in my community, where I get to visit childcare centres from Watsonia to Bundoora to Eltham North, talk with the wonderful educators there about the difference they are making in those children's lives, to see the many special moments that add up to giving those children the skills they need for heading on to school. I also, of course, get to see it in my own life. My 4-year-old still is a strong participant in the early education system, and so every evening I get to come home and hear from him about what he's learnt during the day. Sometimes it is a fact or a figure. Sometimes it's a new number or a new letter. Oftentimes it's learning some of those other skills that you get in this setting, who he played with, how he worked out the disagreements with them, how he worked out his relationship with the wonderful early educators who do such a fantastic job with him. And it makes me aware of how much growth he and other young children get through that system. No Australian family should be shut out from that because of an unfair activity test. And yet that is what those opposite are doing by opposing this bill. They are saying that my child should have the privilege of having that best start in life because I can afford to pay for it, but others should be locked out of that system that gives their child the best start in life. Well, I am proud to say that our government has brought an unprecedented focus to early education over the past 2.5 years. We do know how important it is to get the building blocks in place for a child to be ready for school and for what comes next. It's why we did take to the last election our commitment to cheaper childcare, a measure to help families with childcare costs, but also because we do want to be supporting families to make the most of early education and care. As I said, this is good for children. It gives them the chance to learn and grow in an environment alongside other children with the guidance of those fantastic educators, but it is also good for families, helping to save costs on childcare and providing more choice for parents, particularly for women who might want to return to work or to pick up more hours. And of course, it is good for the economy and for our country as a whole, encouraging more parents back to work, allowing them that flexibility to do more hours, setting up our next generation for the future. All of this brings economic benefits. Alongside the work we have done to support families in early education, we have also been supporting early educators, because we recognise that this environment where our children are being set up for the best start in life, it doesn't just happen. It happens because there are qualified, wonderful, dedicated staff who are in there every day thinking about creative ways to teach our children, to guide them on their journey. And Deputy Speaker, I am sorry to say that for far too long, those wonderful early educators were underappreciated and they were certainly underpaid. This is a heavily feminised industry, and like many heavily feminised industries, like our aged care industry, where we have also raised wages, for too long it hasn't been recognised with the wages that it should be. I am very proud to say that this government is fixing that we are raising the wages for those who are bringing our next generation on the path that's going to set them up for a quality education and a quality start in life. So respecting those educators while also making sure that we are keeping costs down for families. So this is really important. The next part is what this bill does, which is replacing the activity test and introducing the 3-day guarantee. Another part of our government's ambition to make our early education system the best it can be. I did say I wasn't surprised that those opposite are opposing this, because they regularly come into this place and oppose measures that are good for Australian women and good for Australian families. In fact, in responding to this announcement, some of the rhetoric from those opposite has just been I wouldn't say unhinged, but so detached from reality. And the reality, look, some might say unhinged, I probably wouldn't. The reality of Australian families' life and Australian women's lives. We saw Simon Birmingham, Senator, in an opinion piece at the end of last year, making an incredibly out-of-touch and frustrating claim, suggesting that changes to the activity test would mean that women would be dropping their children off to childcare so they can go play golf or Pilates. That is not the reality of Australian women's lives. They're not thinking, oh, I've got 2 hours, I'll pop off to Pilates. They are thinking about, how do I hold down a job? How do I support my family? How do I get all the other things I need to get done? And I hope they do get a bit of time for some Pilates and some exercise. But certainly they are not thinking, well, I'll just pop my child into childcare for 2 hours now because the government's taken away the activity test to go to Pilates. So I would encourage those opposite to get in touch with some Australian women, to get in touch with some Australian families. It is concerning that someone who until very recently was such a senior member of the Liberals' front bench team would show such disrespect to Australian women and to Australian families. This is a benefit for Australian families, and in particular, it is a benefit for those families who can get locked out of our early education system, not because they're going to Pilates, but because they have other strains and pressures on their lives that makes it difficult for them to access early education. So this is actually about making sure those children who most need that support to get the best start in life are able to access it. Again, it is something that those opposite should be able to bring themselves to support, but once again, they are saying no to Australian families and no to Australian women. They are diminishing the value of this really important service for all children in our community, diminishing the value of the work that our early educators do. And of course, it's not, as I said, just in this area when it comes to the difference that this government is making for women that we see opposition from those opposite. We see it time and time again when this government brings forward measures that are designed to support the lives of Australian women. What we get from those opposite is a no. Just last week, again in the Senate, Senator Canavan was targeting the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, suggesting it was a form-filling agency that was taking away from businesses judging people on merit. Gee, I wonder who he's been listening to. For someone who was a minister in the last government, again, it is surprising how little Senator Canavan understands not just about a government agency, but again, about women's lives. Through WGEA, our government has been driving forward gender equity in Australian workplaces. And again, this is good for Australian women. It is good for Australian families, and it is good for Australian businesses and the Australian economy. This term, we have worked and we have closed the gender pay gap to its lowest level ever. More work to do, but that's the achievement we have already made. We've helped employers make their workplaces more flexible for staff with caring responsibilities through our reforms to paid parental leave. We're working to remove barriers to workforce participation with measures like this 3-day guarantee. And we're collecting the data through WGEA that lets us know that we are making this progress. This is not a form-filling exercise. This is about making sure that Australian women are supported, that Australian businesses are better off, and that Australian children get the best start in life. So those opposite should really have a look around, read the room, talk to some Australian women, find out what's going on in their life, and get behind these measures. Deputy Speaker, our government has taken a deliberate view that education in this country does need to be looked at from all levels, from early education through to primary, secondary schooling, up to university and TAFE. We are investing across all of these levels to give Australians the best education they can. As a Victorian, I am particularly pleased to say that last month we reached a historic funding agreement with the Victorian Government to put all public schools in Victoria on the pathway to their full and fair funding. Through this agreement, our government will be increasing our funding to Victorian public schools by $2.5 billion over the next 10 years. And this is the biggest ever investment in Victorian public schools by an Australian government. And we will see this play out in our schools in an incredibly positive way for students in my community and in schools right across Victoria. It goes to all those things that I know parents want to see in our local schools. More individualised support for students, mandating evidence-based teaching practices, and more mental health support in schools. So coupled with these broad reforms that we're delivering in the early education sector, this full and fair funding for public schools in Victoria is a massive win for children in my community, for students in my community, right across Victoria. They will be getting the support and quality education they need, all the way from those early childhood years right up to year 12. And wait, it doesn't stop there. At the tertiary level, our government is making significant investments to support both university students and TAFE students. We have, of course, already delivered cost of living relief to students with HECS debts, cutting $3 billion worth of HECS debt through our changes to the student loan indexation formula. So for around 22,000 people in my community, they saw credits on their HECS balances last year. We've been clear that if our government's returned at the coming election, we are taking HECS relief even further by cutting 20% off all student loans. So this will wipe $16 billion in student debt, benefiting 3 million Australians. And of course, today the Treasurer has also announced that he is taking moves to make sure that HECS debts don't get in the way of students being able to apply for a mortgage in their first home, and that is a very important reform. Thousands of students in my community continue to benefit from free TAFE, enabling access to courses in important industries like early education and like construction, nursing and technology. So at every level, we are doing the work to allow Australians to access quality education. And again, I come back to the fact that this is what this particular bill is all about. Making sure that every child in Australia gets the best possible start in life. Every child in Australia does have the right to the best possible start in life, to a quality early education. The activity test introduced by those opposite has been a barrier for those families who most need that access, and we are taking it away. We are supporting Australian families. We are supporting Australian women. We are doing the work to build our country, to make sure that there is a positive future, and we are doing it while supporting early educators. We are doing it while bringing costs down for families. And this is a work we will continue to do in the face of opposition from those on the other side, in the face of an opposition that cannot see when a measure is good for Australian families and good for Australian women, in fact, who actively work against our efforts to support the lives of Australian women and Australian families. Well, we won't be deterred. We will continue the work up, and I am very pleased to support this bill.
The question now is that the amendment be agreed to. The